Mr. President, I want to make sure that the Senate and the country understands what this debate is all about. Senate Republicans have been writing letters to the Department of Treasury saying that the Treasury SALT rule hurts their state charities. Yet they have been unwilling, at least based on what I'm told, to be part of an effort to fix this and to support those charities. And that's what we would be doing in our effort today to overturn the Treasury Department's flawed, deeply flawed SALT regulations. And my view is these regulations illustrate essentially what was wrong with the Republicans' 2017 tax law. This was a law that was half-baked, rushed to shovel hundreds of billions of dollars to those at the top of the economic pyramid in our country. Then $1.5 trillion was borrowed so that Donald Trump and his Republican allies could find a way to cover this tax cut for cronies and donors. And then, because they still needed revenue, Republicans deliberately targeted middle-class homeowners in states like New Jersey, New York, Maryland, and Oregon for tax increases. For some communities in Oregon, it's not uncommon for property tax bills alone for middle-class folks to exceed $10,000. But when our Republican colleagues took this flawed approach, they didn't want on the SALT issue to listen to experts. And so the Trump Treasury Department stepped in, and without any clear authority to do so, the Treasury Department reversed a long-standing IRS provision that had allowed taxpayers a full deduction for charitable contributions to state tax credit programs. In essence, the Treasury Department created a new rule that extended the $10,000 cap on state and local tax deductions to also include charitable contributions to state tax credit programs. To make matters worse, because Republican senators began to see what an absurd approach this was, Secretary Mnuchin put together another carve-out for Republican interests, trying to figure out how to manage this flawed regulation. So, in effect, private school voucher programs would be exempt from the regulations. Middle-class families pay more, businesses pay less. That is the Republican way. My view is the Treasury Department shouldn't be putting its thumb on the scale on behalf of Republicans, and it certainly shouldn't be using what amounts to a phony regulatory justification to fix this extraordinarily poorly drafted law. While Donald Trump certainly intended for these regulations to hurt middle-class families in some parts of the country, Democratic states, and he could protect Republican interests. The bad news for my Republican colleagues, and this is why so many Republican senators are writing the Treasury Department talking about why their state charities are getting hammered. The regulations produced by the Treasury Department are overly broad, and they hurt the majority of states by effectively eliminating the benefit of those states' charitable tax credit programs. These include credits that support priorities like conservation, childcare, charitable giving, and access to higher education. Now, this is particularly striking given that the Trump tax law was already estimated to slash overall charitable giving by as much as $20 billion a year. Now, on top of that, the regulations that I oppose and feel so strongly about, coming from the Treasury Department, threaten more than 100 charitable state tax credit programs in 33 states. My Republican colleagues, constituents, will be hurt by these regulations, just like my constituents at home. We're talking about child care centers in Colorado and Missouri, foster care organizations in Arizona, historic preservation groups in Kansas, charities in Iowa, Kentucky, and Mississippi, conservation groups in Arkansas, Iowa, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee, rural hospitals in the home of the President and the Senate in Georgia, universities in Indiana, Idaho, Montana, and North Dakota, volunteer responders in Nebraska. Now, as today's debate proceeds, you're going to hear about the comments against these regulations that were submitted to the Trump administration. There's a rural hospital in Georgia that was able to upgrade its heart monitors, a child care center in Colorado that helps parents remain in the workforce, a conservation group that has preserved more than 10,000 acres of land in Florida's Gulf Coast. I just, in wrapping up, would hope my Republican colleagues would put their constituents first by shielding them from the unintended consequences of losing their charitable tax credit and support this resolution offered by the leader, Senator Schumer, myself, and other colleagues. So Senate Republicans have a choice. They can keep writing letters to the Treasury Department complaining about their regulations that hammer their state charities, or they could join us in voting to reverse this policy. I just hope as senators move to this vote, they take the option that I think is the only one you can explain to folks at home at a town hall meeting. I've had more than 950 of them. I'm going to have some more very shortly. Folks have a chance to really see what your priorities are. So the question really here is, are your priorities, folks at home, with these state charities that I've emphasized in everything from conservation to health care to children, are you going to support those state, charities doing that important work? Or are you going to continue to support the Department of Treasury with their incredibly flawed regulations that hammer these state charities? I hope senators of all sides from those 33 states that I just ticked off will vote to protect those charities and join myself, Senator Schumer, a host of other colleagues in voting to get rid of these Treasury Department rules and stand with us on the CRA. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.